Section 17 of 11 Stories by Henry Hasse. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain, read by Cinda J. M. Eternal Zemmd Must Die, Part 2. 4. Lorene Landreth proved a canny navigator. She set a course far beneath the ecliptic, and for 2 days they did not encounter a patrol. Kurt had noticed the spacer was painted solid black and carried no insignia, an old trick of George Landreth's. Was George Landreth connected in some way with all the far-scattered events which De Harries had called the pattern? Had he allowed his gnawing hate to encompass the entire Federation? All else was relegated to unimportance in Kurt's mind beside this single throbbing question. War between the planets was imminent as more and more monstrous happenings occurred without reason. Kurt doubted that Landreth himself could be behind it all. It was too far-reaching and purposeful. But Kurt was resolved to follow his present lead and hope for a way to report back to De Harries. And there was another question, Quilo. Late on the second day, Kurt was off duty when there came a soft rap on his stateroom door and Quilo entered. "The girl is studying maps of the Kiarthan swamp," he announced. "Jeffers and Reichert at the controls. I think they will bear watching, those two." Kurt nodded. He studied Quilo. The little Martian was over his anger, but now he seemed strangely perturbed. "I've been waiting to speak to you alone, Kurt Emmons. Remember Jeffers couldn't understand why you brought me along? I've wondered the same thing from the very first. There were many others to choose for the escape. Strong ones like Reichert." "You made it, didn't you?" Kurt snapped. "Before this is over, you may wish you were back at the prison mines." "That does not answer my question. Why did you select me?" Kurt hesitated. "All right, if you must know, I always had a feeling you didn't belong at the prison. Sure, I knew you were a political, but no ordinary one. And I don't think your name is Quilo." He watched the other's face, saw emotion ripple across the chiseled features. "So," the Martian said softly, "I thought you might have guessed. Was it the tune, the little aria I always sang? Many times I could feel you listening. I sensed that you knew, but I could not keep it within me, Emmons. Doesn't that aria occur somewhere in the Demian Cabal? So you know that. But for you, for any Earthman?" "I know very little about it," Kurt said quickly. "I've heard that it's rooted in your religion somehow, but the thing's meaningless to me." Quilo stood still and straight. Kurt could almost see the emotion welling up inside him like a slow ocean tide. Then Quilo made up his mind. He spoke rapidly and without pause. "You're right. My name is not Quilo. I am Tor Ekvav, Supreme Coordinator of the Society of Deimos on Mars. This cannot mean much to you, an Earthman, so I'll tell you only this. When the occasion demands, we can, and often have, served as a balance wheel in the politics of Mars. Jal Tagar knew this when he took over Mars 6 years ago. Oh, he planned well. The 12 coordinators throughout Mars were simultaneously arrested. It was a paralyzing blow, and Jal Tagar took me, the Supreme Coordinator, by a most treacherous ruse." The little Martian paused. Hate blazed in the indomitable black depths of his eyes. "So Jal Tagar completed his coup, and Mars was under his heel. He deemed that death was too good for me. Only the Mercury mines would do, for that was a slow death." "You paint a dark picture, Quilo, or rather Tor Ekov. But all this was 6 years ago. The Federation has recognized Jal Tagar's government. He has ruled well, and Mars has cooperated in every—" Tor Ekov paced the floor, stopped in front of Kurt. "Do you really believe that, Emmons? What can anyone believe now?" He noticed Kurt's start of surprise. "Yes, I have heard of the strange forces at work in the system. And let me assure you, when dark events are brewing, you'll find Jal Tagar's hand in it somewhere." Kurt waved a hand wearily. Man, don't you know we're going into the Catharthan swamp? You better start thinking about that. I believe your mission is greater than you pretend, Kurt Emmons. You're no prison board investigator. Why did you stop me when we had control of the ship? We could have gone back to Earth or Mars. Don't ask questions, Tor Ekov. Tor's eyes were steady on him. We've got to trust each other, he urged. If I can't return to Mars, it's imperative that I get to a telemagnum. Kurt laughed outright at that one. We're going to the Catharthan, and you speak of telemagnums? I must get my voice through to Mars. Tor's eyes seemed like black jewels in his pallid face. There are those of my society who believe I still live, and when they hear my voice, hear my aria, you will see a new Mars. Kurt shrugged at Tor's babbling. In the face of what was happening throughout the Federation, what did he care about a new Mars? But the mention of a telemagnum struck a sudden note. Lorene Landreth must have a secret base in the Catharthan swamp. If there should be a telemagnum there, powerful enough to contact Earth. Kurt came back to his senses, laughed mirthlessly at such a remote chance. And the next instant he was on his feet as the clangor of the emergency alarm rang through the ship. For a moment he stared at Tor's startled face, then rushed into the corridor with the little Martian pounding after him. They found Lorene and the others in the control room. The girl was calm, impassive, bending over the open receptor as a voice sliced through. Have had you in our beam for the past 5 minutes. As you carry no insignia, you will go into a drift immediately while we approach. Venus Guard calling. Jeffers' dark face broke into a grin, but Lorene remained serious. They never patrol this far from Venus. Jeffers, look to the emergency tubes. We may need some speed. She turned to Kurt. Get on the V panel, will you, Emmons? See if you can pick them out. The Chrysite panel came to life. Kurt grasped the directional finder, swung it in eccentric parabolas. Star pinpoints arced to and fro. A touch on the magna lens brought the blackness swimming into closer view. Then they sighted the guard. 6 formidable spacers emblazoned with the Imperial Venus emblem. Kurt glanced at the proximity dial. They seemed a comfortable distance away, but he knew what a tremendous area the network of finder beams covered. Last warning, the voice razored. Nullify your control immediately or we blast. They're bluffing, Lorene decided. They can't reach us yet. If we can get away from those finder beams, they'll never pick us up again. Jeffers, prepare for emergency blast. She hurried to the control console. This'll give our position away, Kurt exclaimed. She glanced at him impassively. Just stay on that panel, Emmons. The little spacer vibrated anew. Rockets thundered on full power, then the spacer leapt forward, executed a wide parabola that carried it miles out of position. Almost at once, Lorene cut all rockets, and they sped forward on the momentum. Safe, she smiled thinly. They'll never spot us now. A solid black ship. Again, Kurt centered the panel. The Venus Guard had broken formation, widening the area of search. Magnetic beams, pale green and swirling, crisscrossed miles of space. Then Kurt peered intently, puzzled, as a new kind of beam appeared. It seemed to uncoil across space, carrying a little bubble of brighter color before it. Suddenly the bubble burst. An expanse of blinding white light illumined the depths of space. It continued to spread outward, one edge of the perfect light sphere very nearly touching their speeding ship. Startled, Lorene jabbed at the rocket studs. Once more they swept into parabola before she cut power. Dozens of the strange light spheres were appearing behind them now, dotting space for a 1,000-mile radius, expanding, shoving back the darkness. 3 more times Lorene used rockets, changing direction, before they were out of the danger zone. Then their ship was a silent black ghost speeding away. Fine thing, Jeffers exploded as he watched the scene behind them. Spring a new stunt like that? What a target we'd be if we got caught in one of those things. He grinned at Kurt. What won't they think of next, eh? Yeah, Kurt said wryly. A guy just ain't safe anymore. If I were you, I'd write him a letter about it. 5. Venus, mysterious and cloud-obscured, rolled up like a rounded ghost below them. They had approached from the extreme south polar side, and there, Kurt knew, lay the Kayarthan swamp, a vast, unexplored region some 800 miles across. As they entered the first strata of clouds, a curtain of hot rain swept about them, slashing across their ports and dissolving into vapor. Then they broke through, and Kurt felt his insides twisting up into cold knots. The swamp was a festering sore across the planet, a miasmic nightmare shrouded in viscous yellow fog that seemed alive as it curled up to touch the low-lying clouds. Jeffers put into play a penetrant beam that partially dissolved the fog. Lorene drove the ship relentlessly forward. They swept lower, through membranous foliage and corrupted fungi growth reaching hundreds of feet high. There was a moment of terrible uncertainty. Then Kurt saw a clear space spreading out below. A low, structured building occupied the exact center. Lorene set the craft down with no more than a slight roll, then turned to the new men. We have to wear protective suits here. You'll understand why. Jeffers will show you how to get into them. The suits were of flexible beryllium mesh with tough, rubberized helmets fitting snugly around the neck. Kurt noticed that the duroplast faceplates were equipped with ingenious filter units. When you leave the ship, Jeffers told them, be fast. Just stay close to me. The outer lock opened. They leapt to the ground and raced toward the building. Kurt knew instantly that the atmosphere was laden with millions of microscopic spores. The heat was insufferable. He hadn't taken 10 steps when the sweat began trickling into the close-fitting collar. It burned. He heard a sharp zing past his ear, then another. Something struck his meshed arm with enough force to half-spin him around. He saw a tiny, wickedly metallic beetle fastened in the mesh. More of them struck him, and others sang past like winged bullets to flatten against the building. He heard Reichert cry out. Lorene was at the building now, inserting a long-triggered key. There came a crackle of sparks, and the door was open. Welcome to Venus, Jeffers said as they flung themselves inside. Then he saw that Reichert was hit. One of the beetles had embedded itself in his wrist where he'd failed to fasten down the mesh garment. Jeffers tore it away, crushed it underfoot. He hurried to a wall cabinet, came back with a box of evil-smelling unguent to spread over the wound. That'll heal soon. We must have stirred up a nest of those damn dung beetles. Kurt sat down limply. Fire still burned in his lungs. So this was the Kayarthan swamp. He found it hard to believe that far to the north were 3 hospitable continents with modern cities, verdant lands, and mountains rearing into clean air. Quilo moved beside Kurt and whispered, "No telemagnum here, unless that's one." Kurt followed his gaze. Lorene was unlocking a metal cabinet, but it was definitely not a telemagnum. A bank of curious power tubes was connected with sets of coils. The girl made several adjustments. The tubes leapt into silver radiance, and the coils sang a cadence that ascended the scale beyond the audible. Kurt came over to watch. Then he stepped to a window. In the fog overhead, he noticed a fine laced canopy of wires. They came alive now, singing gently and sending down a power that dispelled the fog until only a faint obscurant mist remained. How long do we stay here? Only tonight. Tomorrow we trek into the swamp, but we have to wait for the Fabians. Fabians? Kurt stared at her. Creatures who live deep in the swamp, she explained. We couldn't get to where we're going without them. The station was stocked with food in plastic-sealed containers. They prepared their meal over a tiny atomic stove, and it was a welcome repast for the men from Mercury Prison. When they had finished, Lorene lost little time in explaining the setup. Now that we're here, you men have every right to know what to expect. Our task isn't easy, but we have the protective suits and weapons, and the Fabians are friendly and will guide us part of the way. She moved with quick little strides about the room, as if impatient even at this brief delay. You, Reichert, you still anxious to see George Landreth? Nothing I want more. Then stay alive. That's all I ask of any of you, to stay alive. She paused. You have questions? I'll answer them. Reichert asked the obvious question. How do you know George Landreth is here? Because he built this station. Jeffers and I found it here just as you see it, and I have other proof. That's right, Jeffers nodded. This station's identical to the one Landreth built as a secret base on Io. I was there with him a long time. In fact, I was second in command. He hesitated. Go on, Lorene waved a hand. Tell them the story. About 3 years ago, Jeffers said, observers reported a strange spaceship plunging in from the orbit of Pluto. Well, we watched it from Io. And I can tell you this, it was traveling faster than anything we had at the time. Kurt recalled the event. Astronomers had found it difficult to keep the strange object in sight. Some said it wasn't a spacer at all, but a meteor. Jeffers' voice went on. When this thing neared Jupiter, the planet's gravity slowed it down. We tried signaling it, but no answer. That's when Landreth determined to go out and meet it. He was that kind of man. None of us wanted to go with him. We'd braved many things in the spaceways, but this seemed foolhardy. Landreth laughed at us. He would have gone alone, but finally 3 of the men volunteered. They set out in the fastest cruiser we had, and they never came back. I never saw Landreth again. There was pounding excitement in Kurt's brain. I remember it now. This ship, or whatever it was, escaped Jupiter's gravity. It accelerated and plunged toward the sun. But you believe it crashed here? In the Kjarthan swamp? Crashed, or else Landreth brought it safely here. We know now that he didn't die. My father escaped alive, Lorene nodded, because I saw him once shortly after this. Kurt started. You saw him? You're sure it was after? Yes. He came to Earth. Understand, I hadn't seen my father since I was 14, and he hadn't set foot on Earth in years. Her blue eyes were haunted as she paced the room, but he risked capture just to come there and talk to me. He said it was extremely urgent that I find Jeffers and give him this. She showed them a crude map of Kjarthan swamp with a route leading south. He seemed strange and different, frightening. Not as I'd ever known him. Different how? I can't explain it. He seemed under some stress, a terrible urgency, as if he hadn't much time. Before I could question him, he was gone. An urgency, Kurt repeated. An urgency to come back here? I'm sure of it. I set about finding Jeffers, and it took me months. I finally located him on Ceres. We came here, made friends with the Phibins, even went deep into the swamp with them. But there's a place miles from here beyond which they won't go. I'm sure my father is there. She paused, anguish brimming in her eyes. 2 people could never make it, though. Together we might. We'll have to fight our way. Kurt watched this girl in growing wonderment. By some strange alchemy, her mask of hardness was gone. Something of pain and lost uncertainty rose in her shadowed eyes. Kurt found himself suddenly being glad she wasn't criminal. At least she hadn't been with her father in the latter years. Then a thought fastened upon his mind like a patina. The girl was guilty of removing criminals from Federation prison. Such an act was punishable by death, and Kurt was an agent under direct orders of D'Harry's. He cursed inaudibly. What was happening to him? He had a far greater mission here. He had stumbled upon one thread of D'Harry's pattern, and it might result in unraveling the entire skein of monstrous events which had plagued the planets for the past 2 years. We better all get some sleep, Jeffers was saying. Tomorrow will be a tough day, and I mean tough. Kurt tossed restlessly in his bunk. It wasn't the steady hum of the ionization screen outside that kept him awake. He had a preternatural awareness of something impending. He sat up and saw that someone was moving about. Kurt swung himself silently to the floor, just as silently crossed the room. It was Lorene. Kurt saw the outer door open and close behind her. Quickly he followed. The jungle clearing was free of fog now. Lorene was hurrying toward the spaceship. Kurt followed her inside, then forward to the control room. He watched her manipulating the V-panel. Bits of outer space swept into view, together with the pinpoint gleams that were stars. At last she centered on one, a tiny disk of bright blue. It was Earth. She leaned forward, gazing at the screen. Kurt was startled at the clear-cut radiance of her face. He saw the glint of tears in her eyes and the lengthening glimmer of one that rolled down her cheek. He came forward softly. "It is beautiful, isn't it?" "I miss Earth," she said simply, looking up. "All of us feel that out here, a yearning to get back, but you—" "I've never been back. Not since I started searching for my father 2 years ago." She turned her face to the screen, was silent for a moment. "It must have been terrible for you, Kurt Emmons. How long were you at the prison?" Kurt started. It dawned on him that she still regarded him as one of the regulation prisoners. But Jeffers knew better. There must be a reason why he hadn't told her. "A long time," he answered her question. "Suppose we do find your father," he said slowly. "His life is forfeit anywhere in the Federation. I guess he and Jeffers will start their reign of outlawry again?" Her face was troubled. "I suppose so. But I've got to find him, Kurt. He's in desperate trouble here, and he's still alive. I feel it." Kurt nodded. Then he was suddenly alert as a sound reached his ears. It came as a faint hum far above the jungle roof, the propulsion beam of a spacer. It came louder and nearer. Kurt raced for the outer lock, stared up into a faraway patch of fog. For the merest instant, the fog eddied furiously as a great bulk that seemed a silvery ghost flashed through. Then it was gone. The deafening drone diminished. Kurt whirled upon Lorene. Her face had gone white. "The other times you were here, did you ever see a spacer?" "Never. I can't believe—" "Come on." He hurried back to the control room, clicked off the V-panel, then began ripping away the wires leading to the directional finder. "Man, are you mad? What are you doing?" "That spacer was coming in for a landing, don't you understand? Here, in the swamp. I'm going to find out where. Quick, bring me a toolkit." She hurried to comply. In a few minutes, Kurt had the directional finder uncovered. Twin coils of thin, sensitized metal tape were revealed. He unrolled one, stretched it across the room, attached it to the terminals of the starboard magnet plates embedded into the hull. "A little trick I once learned. The magnet plates act as a sounding board. The vibration is carried across this tape to the finder and recorded. If that ship hasn't landed yet, we ought to get an approximate position." He clicked on the magneplate feed. Powerful coils hummed. The tape stretching across the room began to undulate gently. "We're getting something." Kurt hurried to the finder, turned it on. The second metal tape began unwinding to a rear spool. A beryllium needle scratched a continuous wavering line along the sensitized surface. "The spacer's still in flight," Lorene murmured. It was heading due south. "It's going to berth somewhere in the swamp." For 5 minutes they watched the lengthening line as the tape slowly unrolled. 10 minutes. Then it stopped abruptly. "There, we have it." Kurt spun the tape carefully back into place. "We can follow the route now." He stared at her. "That ship must have come down at least 50 miles from here. And we were going to find our way through this jungle?" "Jeffers and I flew over this swamp dozens of times," she explained. "We've crisscrossed it from one end to the other without spotting a single place to land except here." She examined the route on the tape, excitement showing in her eyes. "But we'll try it again now. This'll save us days." It was still a few hours until dawn, but there was no sleep for Kurt now. He'd had but the briefest glimpse of the mysterious spacer, but one thing he was sure of, the sound. It hadn't been the sound of a rocket-propelled ship. His mind went back to Carver of Perlac, found murdered in space, the frequency tuner stolen. Kurt was certain the silvery spacer he had just seen was powered by a frequency tuner. End of section 17.